Say, kids, what time is it?
It's story time!
Hey, welcome back. I'm here because enough thumbs were put on the previous video, and so now here I am posting the next one. So I'm going to quickly lose track of how many thumbs I'm asking for and everything, so I'm not going to bother with that. Just go ahead and look in the description to see how many thumbs up I'm looking for with each video, and as soon as that threshold has been hit, I will go ahead and post the next one in line. Alright, so here we go. Without further ado, let's continue on. We might even finish that one this episode. Let's see. Josh stood at the threshold of the dark tower after taking a wild ride in a minecart from the center of the village all the way to the base of the mountain. He had convinced Herobrine to disable most of the traps, but Herobrine refused to disable all of them and left 3 of his favorite traps active. He said it would give him some satisfaction upon reaching the crystal at the top. He figured this was Herobrine's way of saying, no pain, no gain. Herobrine said he was only worthy of gaining the prize if he passed the tests. And the first of 3 tests was just on the other side of that door. He took a deep breath and readied himself to pass this first test. He opened the door and the long, single-block wide hallway stretched out into the distance before him. Just like Herobrine had said, every other floor panel had a pressure plate on it. Even though he couldn't see them, he believed Herobrine when he said there was a layer of dynamite the entire length of the floor, 2 blocks deep. Every few blocks, the pressure plates covered 2 floor panels in a row. He would have to jump farther to clear the 2 pressure plates, but be sure to land in the single space before the next pressure plate. If he jumped too far, or not far enough, he would set off the dynamite and might never get back home to the real world. He took a deep breath and started down the hallway at a run and jumped. He cleared the first pressure plate and landed easily on the next clear space. One by one, he jumped and cleared the pressure plates until he reached the end of the hallway with the 2 pressure plates in a row. He needed a bigger running head start to clear both pressure plates. He backed up to the edge of his space and took off running. He jumped right before the first pressure plate and barely made it past the second before hitting the ground again. He stopped short of triggering the next pressure plate just past the empty space. He was almost at the end of the first test and could see a room just past the last of the pressure plates. He was only a few feet away, and if he could clear this last set, he would be home free. He took 3 deep breaths as he prepared to run when something caught his eye. There was a switch on the wall. Herobrine hadn't mentioned it, so he decided not to touch it. Better to be safe than sorry. As he turned back to the hallway, his eye caught the glint of shifting pixels past the 2 pressure plates. He focused on the shift and noticed there were not just 2 pressure plates in a row for the last jump, but 3. He had barely made the jump over 2 in a row. How is he supposed to clear 3 of them? There was no way. He focused again on the wall switch. Maybe this removed the 3rd pressure plate. But if it was that important, why didn't Herobrine tell him about it? He reached for the switch and paused right before pressing it. He looked again at the 3 pressure plates. He couldn't jump that far without landing on the 3rd one. He had no choice but to press the switch and hope for the best. He pressed it, and the entire hallway shuddered as every block of dynamite jumped briefly and started flashing. Josh's heart thumped in time with a hallway of triggered dynamite. At this point, the pressure plates no longer mattered, and he ran as fast as he could out of the hallway. The room just past the hallway was made out of obsidian, and when the dynamite exploded all at once, he was protected from the massive blast. When the thundering explosions died out, he looked back at the hallway he had just come through. The hallway wasn't there anymore. Instead, the entire side of the tower had been destroyed, and a gaping hole sat where the entrance used to be. He turned back toward the steel door on the other side of the obsidian room. Past this door was the 2nd test. He had made it through first test, so why wait? He opened the door and stepped in. On the other side, he found himself standing on a tiny 5-block by 5-block platform that was situated at the midpoint of what looked like a massive well. He looked up and saw that it connected with the top of the nether realm. It was a smooth wall, so he couldn't climb up even if there was a way out along the top. He carefully moved to the edge of the platform and peeked over. He could see all the way down to the bedrock of this world. There was no water at the bottom of this well to break his fall. If he went over the edge, he would not survive. The walls were smooth, and the well was at least 50 blocks wide. The only way across was a single block wide path carved into the wall to his right that led to an identical platform on the other side. As his eyes followed the path, he watched pistons randomly pop out, temporarily sealing off the path before snapping back. If he was standing in front of a piston when it popped out, he would spend the last moments of his life watching the bedrock shoot up toward him at increasing speed. He watched the pistons as they popped in and out randomly all along the path. No, not randomly. Sometimes the pistons filled the path, blocking the entire length all at once, and other times they popped in and out, leaving a traveling gap that would allow someone to move along the path safely and make it across without being knocked off. There was a way across the massive well, but he had to time his start on the path correctly, or else he would, He watched the pistons for a long time, looking for the pattern that would let him travel safely down the path. As he watched, he felt increasing warmth from behind that drew his attention away from the pistons. He turned around in time to see that the floor space closest to the obsidian room door was on fire and completely blocked one of the only 2 ways off the platform. He looked down and noticed for the first time that the entire platform was made exclusively out of wood, with the block under the door already on fire. And the fire was spreading to the blocks around it. Josh only had a few minutes before the entire platform was on fire. He looked back at the path that cut across the wall and saw the pistons move into the correct pattern. He jumped from the platform to the path right before the last row of blocks burst into flames. He moved forward slowly as the pistons snapped away from the path in front of him and before they popped back out to close off the path behind him. Once he reached the other platform, he jumped over to it as the last of the pistons sealed off the path. He checked the platform and breathed a sigh of relief. It was made entirely out of stone. This platform would not be catching on fire anytime soon. He looked at the wooden door that would take him off the platform and away from the massive well. His final test was on the other side of that door. He had passed the first 2 tests and felt ready to enter the caves where the crystal sat on its pedestal. He steadied his nerves, but his arms still trembled as he opened the final door and headed into the caves. The door closed behind him, and as he walked forward, he stepped on a pressure plate that triggered 2 pistons that sealed off the door. He had no other choice but to keep moving forward. Not that he would have wanted to go back that way, even if he could. The cave stretched off into the darkness, the only light provided by a single torch hanging on the wall. Next to the torch sat a bucket of milk and a diamond sword. As much as he would have preferred Herobrine to give him a pickaxe so he could carve his own path to the crystal chamber, rather than follow the meandering caves that already existed, it was nice to finally have something he could use to defend himself. He picked up the bucket and the sword. Both of these would come in very handy should he run into any cave spiders. The last thing he grabbed was the torch, plunging everything into absolute darkness. Andre woke with a start. He had fallen asleep in the chair that he had pulled over next to the pod. The technicians had stopped fussing with the pod, being unable to open it from the outside, and they had all disappeared with his dad into a conference room to discuss their options. But Andre knew that the adults had absolutely no idea what to do. If someone was going to save his brother, it would have to be him. He placed a hand on the pod. "Hold on, Josh. I'm coming to get you." He ran through the lab and entered his dad's office. It was the only computer in the entire building that he knew the password to. He logged on and started Minecraft. He carefully entered in the IP address of the server where his brother was trapped and watched the loading progress bar. Soon, he would be in. And then, he would save his brother and bring him home. Josh walked through the pitch-black caves. Up ahead, he saw red glowing eyes. He placed the torch on the floor next to him and watched as the spider was repulsed by the light and moved away. It took him nearly an hour to make his way to the other sides of the caves. But here he stood in front of the iron door that led to the crystal chamber. His quest was nearly over. He opened the door and looked into the room. At the center of the massive room stood a gold block pedestal with a glowing orange crystal sitting on top of it. He glanced around the room, but didn't see any Endermen guarding it. Herobrine was true to his word that he would remove them before he got there. He cautiously stepped into the room, keeping his sword at the ready should Herobrine change his mind and an Enderman suddenly pop up in front of him. Nothing happened as he walked all the way up to the pedestal. Endermen were nowhere to be seen. Maybe this wouldn't be so hard after all. He had passed all 3 tests getting here, and the Enderman no longer guarded the crystal. A thought suddenly occurred to him. How is he going to get back out? He could easily make his way back through the caves and across the path around the deep well, but the platform on the other side of the chasm had burned away. Maybe he could jump from the path to the door. No, the gap was over 5 blocks wide and he would fall into the well instead. He would have to find another way out of the castle. He glanced at his sword. He had over 1,000 hits available on the diamond sword before it broke. He could use a few of those to make a new path through the tower and get out. He smiled for the first time in a long while. He had a way out. All he needed was the crystal, and he could get completely out of Herobrine's world. He picked up the crystal, and the familiar whop-whop sound made him jump. An Enderman had appeared right next to him. He started to scream when it reached out, hugged him tightly, and then disappeared from the crystal chamber, taking him with it. All right, so that's it for this episode. So I guess we got one more left to finish out Herobrine Rises, the first book, book number 1 in the Herobrine's Quest book series, number 1 Amazon best-selling book series. So just take a look in the description below, see how many thumbs I need before I post the next episode. As soon as that threshold is met, I'll do that. All right, thanks a lot. See you next time.